city of Savannah, Georgia, stands as a monument to Southern history. But beneath the Spanish moss and cobblestone streets lies a darkness that few dare to acknowledge. The Marshall House, located on East Broughton Street, is not merely a hotel for tourists, but a repository of tragedy and death. Built in the middle of the 19th century, it has witnessed the very worst of human suffering, including disease, war, and spiritual unrest. Visitors often report a feeling of heavy eyes watching them from the shadows of the hallways. This is the story of a building that refuses to let go of its dead. The walls seem to breathe with the memories of those who perished within, while the foundation rests upon a literal bed of human remains. Mary Marshall was a woman of significant means and ambition in the antebellum South, who sought to create a legacy that would outlast her mortal life. In the year 1851, she commissioned the construction of the Marshall House to serve the growing needs of the railway passengers pouring into Savannah. The architecture was grand, and the intentions were noble, yet the ground itself seemed destined for sorrow. While the hotel opened with fanfare and celebration, the looming clouds of the American destiny were gathering on the horizon. The luxurious accommodations would soon be converted into chambers of horror, where the cries of the dying would replace the laughter of wealthy guests. The transformation was swift and unforgiving. The first great tragedy to strike the Marshall House arrived not in the form of war, but on the wings of the Aedes aegypti mosquito. Yellow fever epidemics swept through Savannah with terrifying regularity during the middle of the 19th century, decimating the population. The hotel was commandeered by the city authorities to serve as a makeshift hospital for the overflow of victims. Hallways once walked by the elite were lined with cots holding men, women, and children in the throes of the black vomit. The heat of the Georgia summer intensified the smell of sickness and death that permeated the brick and mortar. Doctors struggled in vain to save lives, as the death toll climbed higher with each passing day. During these plagues, the children were often the most vulnerable victims, and their suffering left a permanent psychic imprint on the building. It is said that the cries of feverish orphans echoed through the corridors long after their physical bodies had succumbed to the illness. The hotel staff during these dark times were overwhelmed and often fell ill themselves, leaving the dying to face their end in terrifying isolation. The Marshall House absorbed this agony into its very structure. The guests who stay there today often report hearing the sound of marbles rolling on wooden floors, or the giggling of invisible children. These are the spectral remnants of the young lives cut short by the ravaging fever. The winter brought relief from the mosquitoes, but the respite was short-lived as the nation tore itself apart in the American Civil War. In 1864, General William Tecumseh Sherman completed his march to the sea. and presented the city of Savannah as a Christmas gift to President Abraham Lincoln. The arrival of Union troops marked a new chapter of darkness for the Marshall House. The building was once again seized, this time by the Union Army, to serve as a surgical hospital for wounded soldiers. The elegant dining rooms became operating theaters where the floors were slick with blood, and the air was thick with the screams of men undergoing amputation without modern anesthesia. Surgeons during the Civil War operated with a brutal efficiency that modern medicine would deem barbaric. The primary method for treating shattered limbs was amputation, and the Marshall House saw hundreds of these procedures performed in rapid succession. The severed arms and legs of Union soldiers piled up in the corners of the operating rooms. In the chaos of war and occupation, proper disposal of medical waste was a secondary concern to the immediate need of saving lives. The sheer volume of biological material created a gruesome logistical problem for the exhausted medical staff. They needed a place to discard the severed limbs quickly and discreetly to prevent the spread of gangrene and other infections. The winter of 1864 was particularly harsh, and the ground outside the hotel was frozen solid, making it nearly impossible to dig graves deep enough for the amputated limbs. The surgeons and orderlies made a grim decision that would haunt the building for over a century. Instead of burying the severed body parts in the frozen earth, they pried up the floorboards of the downstairs utility areas and tossed the limbs into the crawlspace. It was a temporary solution born of desperation, but the chaos of the occupation meant the limbs were never retrieved. They remained rotting in the darkness beneath the feet of the living, creating a festering well of spiritual unrest. For decades, the secret of the floorboards remained hidden, while the hotel continued to operate through the ups and downs of the 20th century. Guests and staff would occasionally complain of foul odors that had no explainable source. These phantom smells were described as resembling rotting flesh or decaying flowers. People dismissed these occurrences as the quirks of an old building or issues with the plumbing. No one suspected that they were walking directly above a mass grave of discarded human remains. The spirits attached to these lost limbs remained trapped in the building, confused and angry about the desecration of their bodies. The atmosphere in the Marshall House grew heavier with each passing year. The famous author Joel Chandler Harris, who is best known for his Uncle Remus stories, lived at the Marshall House for a period after the Civil War. Even a man of his creative imagination found the atmosphere of the hotel to be unsettling. He wrote of the gloom that seemed to hang over the hallways and the sense of melancholy that pervaded the rooms. Harris was sensitive to the lingering emotions of the past and likely sensed the trauma that had occurred within those walls. His presence adds a literary footnote to the history of the hotel. But even his fame could not exorcise the ghosts that were already gathering strength in the shadows. By the middle of the 20th century, the Marshall House had fallen into a state of severe disrepair and neglect. The once grand hotel had become a shadow of its former self, operating as a low-rent boarding house. The spirits seemed to thrive in the decay, feeding off the misery of the destitute tenants who called the building home. In 1957, the hotel finally closed its doors, and the building sat empty for many years. The silence of the abandonment allowed the supernatural energy to ferment and grow stronger. It stood on Broughton Street as a hollow shell, guarding its gruesome secrets from the bustling city outside. In the late 1990s, a group of investors saw potential in the dilapidated structure and began a massive restoration project to return the Marshall House to its former glory. Construction crews arrived to gut the interior and stabilize the foundation. It was during this renovation in 1999 that the dark history of the Civil War was physically unearthed. Workmen removing damaged floorboards in what was once the surgical wing recoiled in horror at what they found. Beneath the wood lay a chaotic pile of human bones. These were not complete skeletons, but a jumble of arms, legs, and fingers. The discovery of the bones brought the renovation to a sudden and chilling halt as the authorities were called to investigate. Forensic analysis confirmed that the bones were indeed from the Civil War era and showed clear signs of surgical amputation. The legends of the Union Hospital were proven to be terrifyingly true. The workers were deeply disturbed by the find, and many reported feeling sudden drops in temperature and an overwhelming sense of dread while working in that area. The physical evidence of the suffering had been exposed, and it seemed to wake up the spirits that had been dormant in the darkness. Despite the grim discovery, the renovation continued, and the bones were respectfully removed and interred. However, the removal of the remains did not silence the haunting activity. In fact, the disturbance seemed to trigger a spike in paranormal phenomena. When the Marshall House reopened as a luxury boutique hotel in 1999, the first wave of guests began reporting inexplicable encounters almost immediately. It became clear that while the physical remains were gone, the spiritual imprint of the soldiers and the yellow fever victims had become a permanent part of the structure. The hotel was open for business, but the dead were not ready to check out. One of the most common reports from guests involves the sighting of a Union soldier standing near the windows or sitting in the corner of the rooms. He is often described as a young man wearing a blood-stained blue uniform with a look of utter confusion on his face. Some witnesses claim to have seen him holding his own severed arm, pleading for help, before vanishing into thin air. These apparitions are not transparent or misty. but appear solid and lifelike until they suddenly disappear. The trauma of his amputation and death has locked him in a perpetual loop of suffering within the guest rooms. The fourth floor of the Marshall house is widely considered to be the epicenter of the paranormal activity. This floor was used extensively during the yellow fever epidemics to isolate the dying children. Guests staying on the fourth floor frequently report the sound of children running down the long hallways in the dead of night. When they open their doors to scold the noisy kids, they find the hallway completely empty. The sound of marbles rolling across the ceiling above is another common complaint, even when there is no one staying in the room above. The energy of the children is playful, yet deeply unsettling. Housekeeping staff have their own collection of terrifying stories that they whisper to one another. Many maids refuse to enter certain rooms alone because they feel an oppressive presence watching them work. Cleaning carts have been known to move on their own, and fresh towels are often found thrown across the bathroom floor moments after a room has been cleaned. In some instances, staff members have reported hearing their names called out by a disembodied voice when no one else is around. The entity seems to enjoy interacting with the staff, perhaps mistaking them for the nurses of the past. A particularly disturbing phenomenon reported by guests involves the sensation of being touched while sleeping. People wake up in a cold sweat, feeling a pressure on their chest or a hand gripping their ankle. Some have even reported waking up with unexplained bite marks or bruises that were not there when they went to bed. These physical attacks are rare, but they suggest a more malevolent presence lurking among the tragic spirits. Paranormal investigators believe that the sheer amount of death and pain in the building may have attracted darker entities that feed on fear. The bathrooms in the guest rooms are a focal point for strange activity. Guests frequently report faucets turning on and off by themselves in the middle of the night. The toilets flush without anyone touching the handle. Mirrors in the bathrooms sometimes reveal reflections of people who are not there. One guest reported seeing a nurse in an old-fashioned uniform standing behind him in the mirror. But when he turned around, the room was empty. The water element seems to act as a conduit for the spiritual energy, allowing the ghosts to manipulate the physical environment. There is a specific painting in the lobby of Mary Marshall that many visitors find unnerving. Although it is just an oil portrait, people claim that her eyes follow them across the room. Some staff members have reported seeing the expression on her face change from stern to sorrowful when the lobby is empty. While Mary Marshall herself died elsewhere, her attachment to the building she created is strong. It is believed that she watches over the hotel, ensuring that her legacy survives even if it must share space with the restless dead. The hauntings are not limited to the nighttime hours, as activity occurs in broad daylight. Guests checking in at the front desk have reported seeing people in period clothing walking through the lobby and disappearing through solid walls. These residual hauntings are like recordings of the past, playing over and over again. The energy is so strong that it overrides the present reality. It is as if the timeline of the Civil War and the modern day are overlapping within the confines of the Marshall House, creating a thin veil between the living and the dead. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVP recordings captured at the Marshall House, are among the most compelling evidence of its haunting. Paranormal investigators have recorded clear voices saying names pleading for water and crying out for mother. One chilling recording captured in the hallway features a male voice whispering the word nurse, followed by a deep groan of pain. These recordings suggest that the spirits are intelligent and aware of the living, trying to communicate their distress across the barrier of death. The smell of cauterized flesh occasionally drifts through the lobby, near where the surgery room used to be. This olfactory haunting is visceral and sickening, causing guests to gag before it dissipates as quickly as it appeared. It serves as a sensory reminder of the amputations that took place there. The scent is often accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature that chills the bone. It is a terrifying reenactment of the sensory experience of a Civil War field hospital, forcing modern guests to briefly experience the horror of the past. Skeptics who visit the Marshall House often leave as believers after a single night. One famous story involves a man who loudly mocked the ghost stories in the bar, only to wake up that night to find his bed shaking violently. He checked out immediately at 3 in the morning, refusing to stay another minute. The spirits seem to take offense at being dismissed or ridiculed. They demand acknowledgement of their existence and their suffering. The hotel has a way of humbling those who think they are immune to the supernatural. The haunting of the Marshall House is not just a collection of random scares, but a cohesive narrative of Savannah history. Every ghost story is rooted in a documented historical event. The yellow fever victims, the Union soldiers, the children, and the exhausted nurses are all pieces of a tragic puzzle. The building serves as a container for this history, preserving it in a way that books and museums cannot. To stay at the Marshall House is to sleep inside a history book that has come to life in the most terrifying way possible. Many guests report vivid nightmares during their stay that seem less like dreams and more like memories that do not belong to them. They dream of burning fevers of limbs being sawed off and of dying alone in a crowded room. These psychic intrusions suggest that the emotional residue of the building can infiltrate the subconscious minds of those who sleep there. The boundary between the guest and the ghost becomes blurred in the dream state, allowing the dead to share their trauma with the living. The elevators in the Marshall House are known to malfunction in spooky ways. They often open on the fourth floor without the button being pressed. When the doors slide open, the hallway is dark and silent, but the sensation of being watched is intense. Some guests refuse to take the elevator alone, preferring the safety of the stairs. Yet the stairwells have their own stories of phantom footsteps following people up and down. There is truly no place in the hotel that is free from the influence of the paranormal. Local tour guides in Savannah consider the Marshall House to be the crown jewel of the city haunted history. Crowds gather outside the hotel every night to hear the stories of the bones under the floorboards. The guides often point out specific windows where apparitions have been seen looking out at the street. The hotel embraces its reputation, hosting talks and events about its ghostly inhabitants. However, for the staff who work the night shift, the stories are not entertainment, but a daily reality they must navigate with caution. One particularly tragic spirit is that of a young mother who died of yellow fever while caring for her sick child. Guests have reported seeing a weeping woman in a long nightgown wandering the halls searching for her baby. Her grief is palpable, filling the corridor with a heavy sorrow that can bring sensitive people to tears. She is a reminder of the human cost of the epidemics that shaped the city. Her search continues, endlessly unable to find peace or the child she lost so long ago. The interaction between the ghosts of the Union soldiers and the Confederate history of Savannah creates a complex spiritual dynamic. The soldiers died in enemy territory far from home and buried in a mass grave without ceremony. Their unrest is fueled by the circumstances of their demise. Paranormal groups have tried to conduct cleansing rituals to help them move on, but the activity always returns. It seems the spirits are bound to the land and the building by the trauma they endured, refusing to cross over. Modern technology has provided new ways to document the haunting. Digital cameras often malfunction or capture orbs and anomalies that are not visible to the naked eye. Batteries drain instantly in certain rooms, leaving guests without power for their devices. This energy drain is a common sign of spirit manifestation. The entities draw power from the batteries to manifest their presence. It is a frustration for guests, but a goldmine for investigators looking for proof of the afterlife. The Marshall House stands as a testament to the endurance of the human spirit, even in death. It is a place where the past refuses to be silenced. The renovations may have covered the scars of the building with fresh paint and new furniture, but the core remains touched by death. The bones may be gone from the crawlspace, but the energy they left behind is indelible. It is a beautiful hotel with a heart of darkness, a place where luxury and terror coexist side by side. As the sun sets over Savannah, the atmosphere in the Marshall House shifts perceptibly. The shadows lengthen, and the sounds of the modern city fade away, replaced by the whispers of history. Guests retreating to their rooms for the night are often unaware that they are sharing their space with invisible roommates. The creak of a floorboard or the flicker of a lamp is a gentle reminder that they are guests in a house that belongs to the dead. The true owners are those who breathed their last breath within these walls. The confrontation with the paranormal at the Marshall House is rarely violent, but it is deeply psychological. It forces visitors to confront the reality of death and the possibility of an afterlife. The fear comes not from jump scares, but from the realization that we are surrounded by unseen forces. The hotel strips away the comfort of disbelief, leaving guests vulnerable to the unknown. It is a profound and often life-changing experience for those who encounter the spirits face to face. In the end, the Marshall House remains one of the most active paranormal sites in the United States. Its history of yellow fever and Civil War surgery provides a perfect storm for hauntings. The discovery of the bones served as physical proof of the legends, validating the fears of generations. The building is a living organism composed of brick wood and souls. It continues to welcome guests, offering them a comfortable bed and a glimpse into the terrified eyes of the past. The lingering dread that follows a stay at the Marshall House can last long after checkout. Guests often find themselves thinking about the soldiers and the children wondering if they are still trapped in the dark. The stories become part of the traveler, ensuring that the memory of the dead travels with them. The Marshall House does not just host guests, it marks them. The evil is not a demon, but the crushing weight of sorrow that never fades.